In the gleaming heart of the celestial dominion, where spires of iridescent alloy pierced clouds that shimmered like liquid pearl, lived a man named Corin Vale. He was no warrior, no diplomat, not even particularly remarkable, just a low-level data archivist in the Ministry of Interstellar Affairs, tasked with cataloging trade agreements between human colonies and the dozen allied alien species under the Dominion's banner. His days were quiet, predictable, filled with humming consoles and the soft click of stylus on datapads. He lived alone in a modest apartment overlooking the Grand Canal of Viral, where bioluminescent fish darted beneath bridges woven from living vines. Corin had long accepted that his life would be uneventful, until the day he chose kindness over caution, and everything unraveled. It began on a rain-slicked evening, the kind where the Palace District's gravity-defying fountains sent mist spiraling into the air like ghostly dancers. Corin was walking home, collar turned up against the drizzle, when he heard a whimper from a narrow alley between two merchant stalls shuttered for the night. There, huddled beneath a torn thermal blanket, was a young woman, green-skinned, with hair like spun moonlight, white as bone and falling in tangled waves past her shoulders. Her eyes, large and luminous gold, flickered with pain and fear. One arm was cradled against her chest, clearly broken, and her simple tunic was stained with blood and grime. She looked like a street urchin, one of the countless displaced refugees who trickled into Viral after the border skirmishes on the Kesari Rim. Corin hesitated. Helping strangers was discouraged. The city teemed with spies, con artists, and worse. But the girl couldn't have been more than 17, and she trembled like a leaf in a storm. Without thinking, he knelt beside her. "Easy now," he murmured, voice softer than he'd used in years. "I won't hurt you." She flinched but didn't pull away as he gently examined her arm. The fracture was clean, but infection had already begun to set in, a faint greenish hue spreading from the wound. He knew enough first aid from his mandatory civic training. "You need a medbay. Come on." She shook her head violently, eyes wide with terror. "No hospitals," she whispered, voice raspy. They'll find me." Corin frowned. "Find her?" Before he could ask, distant shouts echoed down the alley. Boots on wet stone, the sharp bark of command in guttural Zentheran. The girl gasped and tried to scramble back, but her strength failed. Corin made a decision that would cost him everything. He scooped her into his arms, ignoring the flare of pain in his own shoulder, and ducked into the shadows just as a squad of armored enforcers rounded the corner, scanning the alley with pulse lanterns. He carried her through back streets and service tunnels, heart hammering, until he reached his apartment. It wasn't much, 2 rooms, a kitchenette, and a balcony, but it was safe. He cleaned her wound with antiseptic foam, set her arm with a splint from his emergency kit, and wrapped her in dry blankets. She watched him the whole time, silent, wary, but her golden eyes softened slightly. "Why help me?" she finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. Corin shrugged, heating broth on the stove. "Because someone should." He didn't ask her name, didn't pry, just gave her food, water, and space. Over the next 3 days, she healed quickly, faster than any human would, and began to speak more. Her name was Lyra, she said. She'd run away from her family after they tried to force her into an arranged marriage with a warlord from the Iron Maw Coalition. Corin listened without judgment, amused by her dry wit and surprised by her knowledge of ancient star charts and forgotten poetry. She laughed at his terrible attempts at cooking, teased him about his mismatched socks, and once, when he tripped over a loose floor tile, she giggled so hard tears streamed down her cheeks. In those quiet days, something fragile bloomed between them. Not romance. Not yet, but trust. The kind that forms when 2 lonely souls find unexpected shelter in each other. But peace never lasts in the shadow of empires. On the 4th morning, Corin arrived at the ministry to find his access badge deactivated. Security guards barred his entrance. Confused, he demanded answers. That's when Director Vorlin, a hawk-nosed man with cybernetic eyes that glowed crimson, stepped forward. "Corin Vale," he said coldly. "You are hereby terminated for harboring a fugitive of the highest security risk. Furthermore, your actions constitute treason against the celestial dominion." Corin's blood ran cold. "What fugitive?" Before Vorlin could answer, a royal skiff descended from the sky, hovering silently above the plaza. Its doors slid open, and out stepped a figure clad in robes of sapphire and silver, flanked by elite Praetorians in obsidian armor. It was Empress Celera herself, the absolute ruler of the Dominion, whose face adorned every credit note and public screen. And standing beside her, arms still in a sling but posture regal, was Lyra. Corin's stomach dropped. The girl from the alley was the Emperor's daughter? No, wait, the Empress had no son, only one heir. You may kneel, Vorlon sneered. But Corin stood frozen, staring at Lyra, betrayal and confusion twisting in his chest. She met his gaze, and to his shock, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Corin, she said, voice trembling. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. The Empress raised a hand, silencing Vorlon. Her voice was calm, resonant, carrying the weight of galaxies. Archivist Vale, you sheltered my daughter when she fled the palace during the assassination attempt on her life. You treated her not as a princess, but as a person in need. For that, you have my eternal gratitude. She paused, then added, and my wrath toward those who would punish compassion. Vorlon paled. Your radiance, protocol demands. Protocol be damned, the Empress snapped. This man saved my child's life when your so-called intelligence network failed to protect her. She turned to Corin. You've lost your position, but I offer you something far greater. Corin swallowed hard. I don't want rewards. I just wanted to help. Lyra stepped forward, ignoring the gasps of the courtiers. Mother, she said firmly, he mustn't be punished, and he mustn't be given some empty title either. He deserves truth and choice. The Empress studied Corin for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, she gestured to the skiff. Come, we shall speak in the Hall of Whispers. Inside the palace, a labyrinth of floating gardens, crystalline corridors, and chambers where gravity bent to the will of ancient tech. Corin felt utterly out of place. Servants bowed as he passed, their multicolored eyes wide with curiosity. Lyra walked beside him, close enough that their sleeves brushed. I tried to tell you on the third night, she whispered, but you were snoring so loudly I couldn't get a word in. Despite everything, Corin chuckled. That bad? You sounded like a dying hoverbike. In the Hall of Whispers, a circular chamber where sound traveled only between those standing at opposite ends of the central dais, the Empress revealed the full truth. The arranged marriage Lyra fled was actually a political trap. The Iron Maw warlord planned to assassinate her during the ceremony and seize control of the Dominion's eastern sectors. Lyra had uncovered the plot, but her warnings were dismissed as childish rebellion. So she escaped, hoping to reach the resistance cell hidden in the lower districts. Instead, she'd collapsed in that alley, half dead from a poisoned blade meant to silence her permanently. And you, the Empress said, turning her piercing gaze on Corin, not only saved her life but shielded her identity. Even when she told you lies, you showed her dignity. That is rarer than loyalty in this court. Corin rubbed his neck, uncomfortable with praise. I didn't know who she was. If I had, you would have done the same, Lyra interrupted softly. That's why it matters. The Empress then made an offer that stunned them both. Corin Vale, I cannot restore your old life. That world is too small for you now, but I can appoint you as Royal Archivist of the Imperial line, with full access to our ancestral records and a seat on the Council of Memory. More importantly, she glanced at her daughter, I release Lyra from all betrothals. Her future is hers to choose. And if she chooses to walk beside a kind-hearted human who sees her soul and not her crown, then so be it. Lyra's cheeks flushed emerald green, a sign of deep emotion among her people. She took Corin's hand, her touch cool and steady. I don't expect you to stay, she said, voice thick. This place is gilded cage. But if you're willing, I'd like to show you the stars beyond the palace walls. Not as a princess and a servant, just Lyra and Corin. Corin looked around, at the impossible beauty of the palace, the weight of history in every stone, the woman before him who'd gone from frightened girl to radiant heir in the span of a week. He thought of his tiny apartment, his quiet job, the life he'd thought was all he deserved. Then he smiled, slow and genuine. I've never seen real stars, he admitted. Only the filtered kind through city smog. Show me. But their fragile new beginning was shattered before sunset. Alarms blared through the palace. A deep, resonant wail that sent servants scrambling. Holographic displays flickered to life in every corridor, showing grim-faced generals and flashing red borders. Iron Maw forces have breached the outer rim, a voice announced. All non-combatants to evacuation vaults. Royal Guard to battle stations. Lyra's expression hardened. They're coming for me, she said. They know I'm alive. The Empress moved swiftly. Corin, you will accompany Lyra to the Sky Sanctum. The shielded, hidden. You'll be safe there. But Corin shook his head. No, everyone stared at him. I may not be a soldier, but I know the palace archives better than anyone. If they're after Lyra, they'll try to disable the defense grid through the old maintenance conduits beneath the data spire. I can reroute the security protocols from there, if someone gets me past the front lines. The Empress studied him, then nodded once. Praetorian Captain Vex, escort Archivist Vale to the spire. Lyra, you go with them. No, Lyra cried. I won't hide while others fight for me. You will, the Empress said firmly, because your life is the future of this empire. But, she handed Lyra a slender blade that glowed faintly blue. If they reach you, make them regret it. What followed was chaos wrapped in thunder. Corin, armed with nothing but a datapad and sheer stubbornness, raced through collapsing corridors with Lyra and Captain Vex at his side. Explosions rocked the palace foundations. Smoke filled the air. At one point, a blast knocked Vex unconscious, leaving Corin and Lyra alone in a crumbling hallway. Lyra fought like a storm, her movements fluid, precise, dispatching 2 Iron Maw infiltrators with that glowing blade before Corin could even blink. You never mentioned you were a warrior, he gasped. I never needed to be, she shot back, helping him up. Until now. They reached the data spire just as enemy forces breached the lower levels. Corin's fingers flew across the console, bypassing firewalls, rerouting power, activating dormant defense drones. Sweat dripped into his eyes, his heart pounding like a war drum. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. Then silence. Had they won? A shadow filled the doorway. Not an enemy. The Empress, bloodied but unbowed, flanked by surviving guards. You did it, she said, relief etching lines into her ageless face. The fleet has repelled the assault. Lyra rushed to her mother, embracing her tightly. Corin stood back, suddenly feeling like an outsider again. But then Lyra turned and pulled him into the hug, her warmth seeping through his scorched tunic. We did it, she corrected. In the weeks that followed, the palace slowly healed. Repairs began. Traitors were rooted out. And Corin, now officially royal archivist, found himself navigating a world of court intrigue, diplomatic dinners, and midnight stargazing sessions with a certain green-skinned princess who insisted on calling him my human librarian. Yet peace was fragile. Rumors spread of dissent among the noble houses, uneasy with a human holding imperial favor. Whispers called Corin a pawn, a distraction, unworthy of standing beside the heir. One evening, after a particularly vicious council session where an elder lord had sneered, "Does your pet even understand our laws?" Corin sat alone on the balcony, staring at the twin moons of Viral. Lyra found him there. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside him, their shoulders touching. After a while, she took his hand in both of hers, her skin cool against his. "Don't be afraid," she said softly, echoing words he'd once spoken to her in that rain-soaked alley. "You belong here, not because of me, because you've earned it." Corin looked at her, really looked, at the way her white hair caught the moonlight, at the quiet strength in her golden eyes, at the scar on her wrist from the assassin's blade. He saw not just a princess, but the girl who'd laughed at his burnt stew, who'd fought beside him in the dark, who'd chosen him despite every reason not to. "I'm not afraid," he said, squeezing her hand. "Just figuring out how to be worthy of all this." "You already are," she whispered. And in that moment, beneath alien stars and the watchful gaze of a 1,000-year empire, Corin Vale stopped feeling like an imposter. He was exactly where he was meant to be, with her. The story wasn't over. Far from it. There would be more battles, more betrayals, more laughter shared over terrible cooking. But for now, in the quiet between storms, they had this. A promise unspoken, a future unwritten, and the certainty that kindness, simple, stubborn human kindness, could change the fate of worlds. Weeks turned into months, and Corin settled into the rhythms of palace life with surprising ease. He wore the silver-threaded robes of the royal archivist without irony, though he still kept his old boots, scuffed and stubbornly human, beneath the hem. Lyra, now formally recognized as Crown Princess of the Celestial Dominion, walked beside him not as a ruler above him, but as an equal. Their bond deepened in quiet moments, reviewing star maps in the observatory, debating ancient philosophies over spiced tea, or simply sitting in silence as bioluminescent moths drifted through the garden courtyards. The court watched, some with admiration, others with simmering resentment. But peace, as Corrin was learning, was never more than a pause between storms. The first twist came not from enemies, but from within. One evening, while cataloging recovered data cores from the Iron Mole raid, Corrin stumbled upon encrypted files labeled Project Cradle. Curious, he bypassed the security protocols, a skill honed during his years as a low-level archivist, and uncovered something that made his blood run cold. The files detailed a secret breeding program initiated decades ago by the Dominion's High Genetic Council, an effort to create hybrid heirs capable of bridging human and Xenthran biology. Dozens of human volunteers had been recruited under false pretenses and vanished. Worse still, one name appeared repeatedly in the logs. Corrin Vale, genetic match tier 9, compatible with royal mitochondrial strain. He stared at the screen, stomach churning. Was his presence here, his compatibility with Lyra, not chance but design? Had someone placed him in that alley on purpose? Or worse, had his own parents known? Before he could process it, Lyra burst into the archive chamber, her white hair disheveled, eyes wide with panic. Corrin, they've taken Mother. What? He stood so fast his chair clattered backward. A coup, she said, voice tight. Led by Lord Varn, the same elder who mocked you in council. He claims Mother is unfit to rule after failing to protect the heir. They've locked her in the Obsidian Tower. The Praetorians are divided, half loyal, half bribed or threatened. Corrin's mind raced. We need proof of his treason. I have none, Lyra admitted. His moves are clean, legal even. Then Corrin remembered the data core. Maybe not clean enough. He pulled up the Project Cradle files and scrolled to a hidden subfolder. Financial transfers. Millions funneled from Dominion Black accounts to Varn's private fleet. And a final entry, dated just 3 days before Lyra's escape. Subject Lyra Z7 extraction authorized. Asset Corrin V4 activated for proximity bonding. Lyra read over his shoulder, her breath catching. They engineered this? Our meeting? Our feelings? Corrin met her gaze, heartbreaking. I don't know, but I swear to you, I felt nothing until I saw you shivering in that alley. Whatever they planned, what happened between us was real. She studied his face, searching for deception. Then slowly she nodded. I believe you. She straightened, resolve hardening like cooled steel. Then we used their own weapon against them. That night, under cover of a solar eclipse, a rare celestial event that temporarily disabled orbital surveillance, they infiltrated the Obsidian Tower. Corrin wore a stolen guard uniform. Lyra moved like a shadow, her blade silent. They fought through traitorous sentries, Corrin using his knowledge of palace ventilation shafts to bypass patrols. In the tower's highest chamber, they found Empress Celera chained to a resonance throne, a device that siphoned her life force to power Varn's ascension ritual. Varn stood before her, robed in crimson, flanked by cyber-augmented zealots. Ah, he sneered, the mongrel and his pet. How touching. You're not fit to rule, Lyra spat. Perhaps not, Varn said calmly. But I am necessary. The Dominion weakens. We coddle humans, share secrets, dilute our bloodline. You would marry this archivist? A man whose very genes were selected like livestock. He laughed. You think your love is pure? It was coded before you were born. Corrin stepped forward. Even if that's true, we chose each other anyway. That's what makes it real. Varn's smile faded. Sentimentality. The flaw of your kind. He raised a hand. Seized them. But Lyra was faster. She threw a pulse grenade not to kill, but to overload the resonance throne circuits. Light erupted. Alarms shrieked. In the chaos, Corrin freed the Empress while Lyra dueled Varn atop the crumbling balcony. Wind howled. Below, the city glittered like scattered diamonds. You cannot win, Varn snarled, his blade crackling with energy. The council will never accept a half-breed heir. I'm not half anything, Lyra shot back, parrying a vicious strike. I'm all Xenthran, and all myself. With a final, graceful arc, she disarmed him and kicked him off the balcony. He didn't scream as he fell, only vanished into the night. The coup collapsed by dawn. Varn's allies surrendered when broadcast footage of his confession, extracted from the data core, played across every public screen. The Empress, weakened but alive, addressed the Dominion from the Sun throne. We will no longer hide our past, she declared. Project Cradle is abolished. All test subjects will be found, compensated, honored. And my daughter. She placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder. We'll choose her path freely, with no strings, no schemes, no shame. The crowd roared, but Corrin felt no triumph, only unease. If Project Cradle was real, how many others like him were out there? Planted, waiting. Unaware? His fears were confirmed a week later when a cloaked figure slipped into his quarters. Not an assassin, but a young woman, green-skinned like Lyra, but with fiery orange hair and haunted eyes. She dropped to her knees. "Please," she whispered. "They're coming for us. All of us." Corrin helped her up. "Who are you?" "My designation was Kira V9, she said. "Like you, Corrin V4. We were bred to bond with royal bloodlines. But when Lyra escaped, the program panicked. They activated emergency protocols. Now they want us eliminated, fail-safes gone wrong." Lyra entered then, having sensed the disturbance. When she saw Kira, her face paled. "Another sister?" "Not by blood," Kira said bitterly. "By design." Suddenly, the palace trembled. Not an earthquake, an orbital strike. Shields flickered. Red lights pulsed through the halls. "They've launched the purifier," Kira gasped. "A bioweapon keyed to hybrid DNA. It'll sterilize every engineered subject in the system, including me. Including, possibly you, Princess." Lyra grabbed Corrin's arm. "We have to evacuate the others." "There's a sanctuary," Kira said, "on the moon of Xylos, hidden beneath the crystal wastes. But the ship, it only holds 12. Corrin looked at Lyra. "Then we make room." What followed was a desperate race across war-torn sectors. Using a stolen scout vessel, nicknamed the Sparrow for its size and speed, they rescued 6 more subjects. Twins with violet skin and silver eyes, a stoic medic with blue markings, a teenage boy who could interface with machines through touch. Each carried scars, physical and emotional. Each had been used, discarded, forgotten. Through asteroid fields and ion storms, Corrin piloted while Lyra coordinated defenses. Kira hacked enemy comms. They became a family forged in fire. On Xylos, beneath shimmering crystal spires, they found the sanctuary, an ancient ark built by early Zenthran dissidents. Inside, cryopods hummed, waiting. But as they prepared to seal the vault, alarms blared again. A Dominion dreadnought descended, not Varn's faction, but loyalists under General Torvak, who believed the hybrids were abominations that must be purged for the Empire's purity. "We can't fight that," Corrin said grimly. Watching the ship blot out the sky, Lyra clenched her jaw. "Then we don't fight. We show them the truth." She opened a channel, broadcast her face across every frequency. "General Torvak, you claim to serve the Empress. Then hear her decree. These lives are under Imperial protection. Harm them, and you commit treason." Silence. Then, a response. Not from Torvak, but from the Empress herself, her voice crackling through static. "Stand down, General, or face the full wrath of the throne." The dreadnought hovered, then turned away. Relief washed over them, but Corrin noticed Lyra's hands shaking. Later, in the quiet of the sanctuary, she confessed. "Mother's signal. It wasn't from the palace. It was a recording. I looped her last public address and spliced in new audio. If Torvak had scanned deeper, he'd have known," Corrin finished. He pulled her close. "You gambled everything." "I had to," she whispered, "because you taught me that some risks are worth taking for people you love." Months passed. The Dominion stabilized. The Empress publicly adopted all the rescued subjects as wards of the crown, granting them citizenship, names, futures. Corrin and Lyra split their time between the palace and Xylos, building something new. Not just a refuge, but a home. Yet another twist waited in the stars. One evening, while scanning deep space frequencies, Kira intercepted a faint distress call. Not in any known language, but in the genetic resonance code used in Project Cradle. It originated from beyond the Veil Nebula, in uncharted space. "There's more of us," she said, eyes wide. "Out there. Alone." Lyra looked at Corrin. "We can't leave them." He smiled, already plotting coordinates. "Then we go get them." And so, aboard a refitted cruiser gifted by the Empress, renamed the Kindness, they set course for the unknown. Corrin at the helm, Lyra beside him, Kira and the others laughing in the mess hall, the stars stretching endlessly ahead. Their story wasn't about thrones or bloodlines anymore. It was about rescue, about rewriting destiny, about proving that even in a galaxy of schemes and empires, the simplest act, helping someone in need, could ripple outward and change everything. And as the ship vanished into the nebula's glowing embrace, Corin knew. This was only the beginning. The journey beyond the Veil Nebula was unlike anything Corin or Lyra had ever known. Space there didn't obey the usual laws. It twisted light into song, bent time into loops, and whispered forgotten memories into the minds of travelers. The kindness sailed through rivers of stardust that shimmered like liquid silver, past derelict generation ships older than the Dominion itself, their corridors echoing with the ghosts of lost civilizations. They followed the resonance signal to a hidden world orbiting a dying red star, Elithra, a planet cloaked in perpetual twilight, its surface veiled by bioluminescent forests and crystalline lakes that reflected not the sky, but the dreams of those who looked into them. There, deep within a cavern woven from living stone and ancient roots, they found them. 23 more hybrid children, ranging from toddlers to teens, all products of Project Cradle's final, desperate phase. Abandoned when the program collapsed, they'd been raised by an aging AI caretaker named Matria, who had once been a lead scientist and later a defector. Matria greeted them not with weapons, but with tears. "I tried to protect them," she said, her voice trembling through a worn vocal synthesizer. "But I am failing. Their bodies, they're rejecting the environment. Without proper gene stabilizers, they won't survive another cycle." Corin didn't hesitate. "Then we take them home." But Elithra wasn't ready to let them go. As they prepared to evacuate, the planet itself seemed to awaken. Vines coiled around the ship's landing struts. The ground trembled. From the forest emerged towering guardians, biomechanical sentinels shaped like wolves with wings of moss and eyes of molten amber. They weren't hostile. They were testing. Lyra stepped forward alone, hands open, palms up, the Zenthran gesture of peaceful intent. She spoke in the old tongue, the language of root and star, taught to her by her grandmother. "We mean no harm. We only wish to carry your children to safety." For a long moment, silence. Then, the lead sentinel bowed its great head and stepped aside. Back on Viral, the Empress welcomed the new arrivals with open arms. Laboratories were converted into classrooms. Gardens became playgrounds. Corin, now unofficially titled Guardian of the Lost Branch, worked tirelessly to secure medical treatments, legal rights, and, most importantly, families for each child. Some chose to stay with him and Lyra. Others were adopted by compassionate nobles or returned to human colonies that had once unknowingly donated their genes. Through it all, Corin and Lyra grew closer. Not in grand declarations, but in quiet constancy. In shared sunrises over the palace gardens, in late-night debates about ethics and legacy. In the way Lyra always saved him the last slice of honey cake, and how Corin learned to braid her white hair before state functions so it wouldn't fall into her soup again. One evening, as twin moons cast silver paths across the Grand Canal, Lyra led Corin to the Hall of Blossoms, a secluded courtyard where Zenthran royals proposed marriage by planting a seed that would only bloom if both hearts were true. In her hands, she held a sapling of the Luminara tree, sacred to her people, its leaves said to glow brighter with every act of kindness between its bonded pair. "I don't need rituals," Corin said softly, taking her hands. "I've loved you since you laughed at my burnt stew. And I've loved you since you carried me through rain without asking why," she replied, golden eyes shimmering. "But this is for my people, for our future." She knelt and planted the sapling together with him. As their fingers brushed over the soil, the tree pulsed with soft light, then burst into radiant bloom, petals swirling around them like captured stars. The wedding was held 3 cycles later, not in the sun-throne chamber, but in the very alley where they'd first met, now renamed Kindness Lane, lined with Luminara saplings gifted by citizens from every corner of the Dominion. Humans, Zenthrans, hybrids, even former enemies stood side by side. The Empress officiated. Kira served as Lyra's honor sister, and Corin wore his old boots beneath royal robes. "So I never forget where I started," he told the cheering crowd. They didn't honeymoon on some distant paradise. They went to Xylos, to the sanctuary, and spent their first week building a nursery beside the Crystal Lake. Because within the year, Lyra would carry their first child, a daughter with green-tinged skin, white wisps of hair, and Corin's stubborn chin. They named her Elara, after the first star visible at dusk. Years flowed like gentle tides. More children followed, 3 daughters and 2 sons, each a blend of human resilience and Zenthran grace. They grew up climbing palace spires, racing hover skiffs through canyon passes, and sneaking into the archives to hear Corin tell stories of the time. He lost his job to help a homeless girl, who turned out to be a princess. The children never tired of it. Neither did Lyra. Corin never returned to data archiving. Instead, he founded the Institute of Compassionate Futures, a school where human and alien children learned not just science and history, but empathy, conflict resolution, and how to listen, truly listen, to those who are different. Lyra, now co-regent alongside her mother, reformed the Genetic Council into an ethics board, ensuring no life would ever again be engineered without consent. Their home was a sprawling villa on the palace outskirts, filled with laughter, mismatched furniture, half-finished inventions, and the constant pitter-patter of small feet. On quiet nights, Corin and Lyra still sat on the balcony, watching bioluminescent fish dart below, holding hands like they had in the darkest hour of the coup. "You ever miss the simple life?" Lyra asked once, resting her head on his shoulder. Corin smiled. "This is the simple life. Love, family, purpose. Everything else was just noise." And so they lived, not as hero and princess, not as savior and heir, but as partners, parents, and pioneers of a gentler galaxy. Their story became legend, not for its battles, but for its heart. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. A world where kindness wasn't weakness, but the strongest force in the universe. Under the ever-blooming Luminara trees, surrounded by children, friends, and a peace they'd fought hard to build, Corin Vale and Princess Lyra of the Celestial Dominion lived happily. Not just ever after, but every day after, full of joy, purpose, and love that spanned worlds. Years melted into decades, but their love never dimmed. Corin and Lyra raised 5 children, each a joyful blend of human warmth and Zenthran grace. In a sunlit villa nestled between palace gardens and the Grand Canal, their home echoed with laughter, bedtime stories, and the clatter of mismatched dishes from Corin's famously chaotic cooking nights. Lyra, now co-regent of the Dominion, abolished every remnant of Project Cradle and turned its archives into a museum of empathy. Corin led the Institute of Compassionate Futures, where alien and human students learned side by side, building bridges instead of borders. Every evening, they walked Kindness Lane, the alley where it all began, now lined with glowing Luminara trees that brightened with every act of generosity nearby. Their grandchildren played beneath those branches, weaving crowns of light and asking for tales of the archivist who saved a princess. On their 50th anniversary, the entire city lit lanterns in their honor, not for power or conquest, but for choosing kindness when it cost everything. In their final years, gray streaked Corin's hair and Lyra's steps slowed, but their hands still found each other without looking. They watched twin sunsets from their balcony, wrapped in silence that needed no words. When Corin passed peacefully in his sleep at 92, Lyra held his hand and whispered, "You were always enough." She followed 3 moons later, smiling in her garden, surrounded by blooming Luminara. They were buried beneath the first tree they planted together, its light never fading, just as their legacy never would. And in the heart of the Celestial Dominion, kindness remained the highest law, the truest crown, and the quiet miracle that changed everything.